Good morning and welcome back to Coffee and the Word. I know I've been gone a little while. I was trekking around in the mountains of Colorado, and while I missed doing Coffee and the Word, I also really enjoyed what I was doing. I hunt Colorado. I try to hunt it every year, and this is my third year, and this is the first year that I actually harvested an elk, which was my goal, to harvest an elk with my bow, and I did it. And since then, I've eaten elk burger and I've eaten elk steak, and I'm telling you, elk is fantastic. It's a very good meat, and so I'm really excited about hunting more in the future. But I don't want today to be about my hunting exploits or how wonderful and fabulous a hunter I am. I'm just kidding, kind of. But today's verse plays into that statement. It comes from 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 6. And here's what Peter says. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Now, there's a lot of context in this verse, but I think this verse alone has enough of its own. So he goes on to say, cast all your anxieties on him, for he cares for you. And then he says, be alert and be vigilant, because the roaring lion is seeking to devour you. All of those things are in this text, but let's focus first on his first affirmation, which is humble yourselves under God's mighty hand. And when I read this verse, and when I've always read this verse, I think of it this way. Don't think too highly of yourself, right? That's what humble yourself means, is lower your position. Be less proud is usually how we think of this. And there's some text that suggests that kind of concept, but this one isn't that one. In fact, Peterson in the Message version says this, and I think he does a good job of understanding what Peter is saying. Here's what Peterson writes in the Message version. Be content with who you are and don't put on airs. And so Peterson says that this humble yourself means know yourself and be content with who you are. Be content with who God made you to be. And then also don't pretend to be something you're not. Don't pretend you're higher than you should be. I heard one person say that this word humble literally means to live in the space you've been given. In other words, be who you were created to be. Don't be less than, but also don't pretend you're more than. Don't pretend you're less than. Don't pretend you're more than. Humble yourselves, therefore, before God's mighty hand. And others, be everything God has called you to be, and nothing less and nothing more. Don't try and press beyond, and don't shirk less than. But I want you to listen to the rest of this, because the really cool thing about what this text tells us is not only does it tell us that we can humble ourselves before God's mighty hand. In other words, we can be who we're supposed to be. We don't have to pretend we're more than, and we don't have to pretend we're less than. We can be who we're supposed to be. And listen to this part. He may lift you up in due time. And I love this part, because one of the things that most of us, we really struggle with is we don't like someone else's timing. We want everything in our time. We want everything when we expect it. We want everything in the context and in the way that we hope for it. But the reason that we do that is because we haven't humbled ourselves. We don't realize we don't have all knowledge. We haven't come to the place where we stay in our lane and know who we are. We are not the one who should be making decisions about when the right time for us to go or stay is. That's God's job. That's what God has way more information than you and I do. And so Peter says, humble yourselves therefore before God's mighty hand. He's powerful enough to do what he's about to suggest, which is in due time, he will lift you up. In other words, in due time, he will take you where you need to go. In due time, he will bring you where you need to be. But you need to be in the space you're in now. You need to be who you were created to be now. And then you need to wait for God to lift you up. You need to wait for God to move you forward. There's a story in the Old Testament about a guy named Saul. He was the first king of the Israelites. And the first king of the Israelites was told to go and wait. He was told to go and wait. And then Samuel would come, I believe it was Samuel. Samuel would come and make the sacrifice before they went to war. Well, Saul couldn't wait. And he didn't see any reason why he needed to wait on Samuel. He could do this, but he was not a prophet of God. He was not a priest of God. He was not the one who was supposed to bring the sacrifice. So he offered the sacrifice before God himself because he couldn't wait for what God told him to wait for, because he couldn't stay in the position he belonged in. And waiting is difficult. I understand that. I'm a terrible waiter. In fact, something about hunting that is very difficult is the waiting, right? And so, but it was in my waiting that my elk came, but I'm not going to get into that. I said I wasn't going to talk about that. Here's the thing I want us to understand. You may not be where you think you should be. That doesn't mean you're not where you should be. You may not have what you think you should have. That does not mean you don't have what you should have. We need to learn to humble ourselves, keep our position, stay in the position that God intends us to be in, and then allow God to take us where he wants us to be. God has a plan, and his plans are higher than yours and greater than yours. Let's not be like Saul, where we try to play a role that we don't have the right to play. By the way, that ended disastrous for him. And it always ends disastrous for us as well. Be who God called you to be. Do what God called you to do. Humble yourself before his mighty hand. And in due time, he will lift you up. I hope you have a blessed day. This is Monday. This is supposed to be an encouragement. I hope you're encouraged by this, to know that God is perfectly okay with you being right where you are supposed to be. He's not expecting you to be more than he made you to be, and he's not expecting you to be less than that. Be in the space you're supposed to be. And I want to remind you of Peterson's words, because Peterson says, be content with who you are and don't put on airs. And I hope you'll take this, and I hope this week you will walk in that truth. God bless you. Hope you have a wonderful week. I'll see you tomorrow. This has been another edition of Coffee and the Word.